Go.
First step is, whoa, okay, make sure that your kick legs are actually tightened so it doesn't scoot forward. Well, I mean, we've already taken care of the first step. The first step is put the rug down, right, so that nothing scoots. You never, ever, ever, ever want to put a drum set on a hardwood floor.
Unless you're playing Brooks and Dunn, then you want some scooting.
Yeah.
Dumb joke.
Yeah. But anyways, now that we've all recovered from that joke, all right, your first step is to get the spacing between your foot and your kick. Another thing, too, they're going to need to adjust on this is, it doesn't have a key attached to it. Let me get a key. You want to make sure the beater, for almost everything you want to make sure the beater is hitting directly in the center of the drum head. The center of the drum head is called a node, and what that does is it has the most impact and the least amount of ringiness. You already hear the difference?
Yeah.
Like that's not just a factor of now you've got a longer arm to exert more force. It's also now we're hitting in the center of the drum and you're not hitting any of those like really, really horrible ringing frequencies.
We call them modes as opposed to nodes.
You call them modes? Oh. Well, in drumhead language, center is called a node.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the node. These are all modes.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So,
Modes are where things pile
who
up.
would have thought that you learn things in a school, man? Dang. All right. So, but once you've got, your beater height right, you want to make sure that you've got your comfortable kick angle. Now, what I recommend for damn near everybody is front of your kneecap, basically right above your ankle, right? And you want your femur to be down on a downward angle so that you can play with your hip flexors, right? It's the biggest, most powerful muscle in your body, so use it, right? It has the most stored glucose in it. That means you're going to get tired the slowest if you use this muscle. If your leg is crooked like that, if you're down lower, and a lot of times you're playing with these muscles, you get shin splints because you're trying to use this muscle here for repeated motion, and it just does not have the energy storage for that. Right? So that's why if you're playing drums and your shins get tired, it's because your leg's in the wrong position. Next thing is your snare. Your snare almost always goes basically touching the inside of your knee right here. Right? I keep mine pretty darn close because I've got a pretty long torso, which means that when I sit up straight, my arms kind of suck in. But if you've got a bit of a shorter torso, it can be a little bit farther out. The height of your snare is almost always at the karate chop height, right? Which is you take a right angle of your arm and you dip it down a little bit, about an inch, and that underside of your arm is how tall it should be, right? That is what's going to make it so that you can keep your spine in the correct alignment.
Will that also make it easier for rim shots?
Yes, and turn rim shots into basically something you don't have to think about.
Yeah.
Right? Especially, now, I play traditional grip, so that means that
You hold
and also, I'm going to need to tilt this, but when you're playing match grip, and it's at the right height, it's pretty much, you have to think about not hitting rim shots. Right? It takes all the thinking out of the equation. All right, next, can you hand me that hi-hat? Yeah, this is the next step, because this is basically forming the tripod of your stability of everything that you do. Now notice, you take a look and get a camera angle of where my knees are sitting here. Notice how they are pretty much like cradling the drum.
Yeah.
Right? If you sit wide, look what happened to my spine. Right?
Wait, do that again.
Yeah. If you sit wide, that's what happens. Right? Right? And you're gonna feel off balance. So a lot of the issues that you run into when you're transitioning around the drum comes from the fact that you start off a place that's off balance, and so when you try to move, your body tries to compensate and panics. And so you have hesitations that happen just because you're trying to tell your body to do something, your body says, I don't feel safe, so I'm gonna wobble. Right? Because that's what wobbling is your body trying to correct things that are happening. And so if you get a good solid foundation where your feet are flat on the floor and your spine is directly pushing down, on your drum throne, then you can pretty much move anywhere, have your spine be straight up, and your timing is going to be tighter, and you're going to get a whole lot less tired, not just because you're using your body mechanics the way that they're designed to be used, but also you're not expending any energy, conscious or unconscious, trying to correct your body position. So that means it's just one less thing that you have to do, and so you got that much more focus and attention that you can put on your playing, right? And like, we're not even done yet. So next one I like to do is the crash cymbal, right? Now crash cymbal height is pretty much always a variable based on style, size of the crash. Like I'm on this side today, I'm gonna have like a 20-inch crash, and so it's gonna be up and it's gonna be tilted. And also because it's a whole bunch of Americana stuff, I'm gonna have it tilted too, so that I'm not tempted to whack it. Right? If you're playing, like, you know, we're talking about Disturbed or talking about heavy metal, you know, you want things to be pretty much as flat as possible, because that's what lets you physically exert the most force on it. You know, like that's why if you look at a whole lot of these whole lot of like heavy metal guys, they either have a flat snare or it's tilted back like this because they're sitting really low. And there's a reason for that, and I might go into that later. But for most people who aren't playing like massive amounts of double bass, a flat snare drum and this kind of stance is going to do you right 99% of the time. Okay? But back to the crash. The crash, I like mine high, especially when I'm in the studio, so that there is room for microphones everywhere, right? If I'm playing something much more technically demanding, then I will go more to a live setup, you know, where everything is a little bit tighter. That is going to be much bigger challenge on the end of, you know, the engineer, because now you've got all this mic bleed happening. But if you've got, you know, if you move your crash cymbal over here, right, and way up here, and I'll turn that around, right? Yeah, it is really, really high. But think of, you've got a hi-hat mic right there. How much bleed are you gonna get from that cymbal to that mic?
Probably about 6 to 12 dB down.
Already, right? So like everything you do in this setup, and this is very much a studio setup too. Now, even though I say you want to start with a basis of stability, I am probably going to move my hi-hats out here just so that you have a little bit of a wider range, and it's just less work for you guys to do post.
Yeah, also bear in mind we got to get microphones in on these things.
Yep.
And leave space.
Yeah, and also another thing too, with this space, not only are you preventing bleed from here to here, you're also giving yourself so much room for your snare microphones, because your snare is the second most important thing in every recording you ever do. The first most important is vocals, right? Yeah, so this is your, you know, like, have you ever seen that movie, The Blind Side?
Yeah.
Yeah, that speech in the middle is like the second most highest paid guy on the football field is the left tackle. This is your left tackle of your song, you know. Like, it's the second most recognizable sound that any record ever has, right? So you're probably going to go at least 2 microphones, maybe 3. Sometimes I've even had 4 microphone setups when these guys go really nuts and they want to put a microphone on the air port as well, to make like a, right? But you've seen that before,
Yeah.
right? All right, next, for toms, now I said that I hated this rack mounting system earlier. I hate it for live. For what you're doing in the studio, it's absolutely perfect, because these make it so difficult to get your drums close together. And when I'm playing live, I love drums that are close together. But when I'm playing in the studio, I want the exact opposite. I want that much space, right? Next is floor tom, if you would. So floor tom, I want to make sure that there's space from here to here, so that way, like, I'm not worrying about bleed from here to here, or bleed from if you put a mic on the ride cymbal, you know, because that's another really common one. But as far as position goes, when I'm going live, it's pretty much hugging the other side of my right leg here. Like, my leg is pretty much straight in this valley, so that it forces me to go straight up and down, which is what you need to do anyways. but if you put your drums in the right position, it'll tell your mind that, oh, when I'm not straight up and down, or if there's anything wrong happening with my technique, you get the signal of I'm knocking into drums. And so you know that there's something up there, right? Next would be a ride cymbal. Now, the ride cymbal is going to be pretty much the same story as the crash cymbal. Ride cymbals, since they're generally played on the body rather than the edge, they are going to, it's probably going to be a much, these are, haven't really worked with Pearl hardware much. Yeah, can you hand me that T-bolt on top of that cymbal?
This one? On this one?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Take it off there. So, if you only got one, you want to tighten up your ride cymbal because its angle is more important. When you're hitting a crash, you got a lot more freedom with how you approach it because you're just hitting on the edge. Right? So tighten that up here, and right now it's sagging kind of this way. You tighten this up, and yes, it's going to choke the sound a little, but with a ride cymbal, you generally want a tighter sound anyways, and what these pads are going to do is they're going to cut off a little bit of the bell resonance, so you get a much purer sound that way sometimes. But also, what I mostly wanted to do was change that angle so that now, when I take a stick, sticks are up here. When I take a stick, I don't have to think about anything, and it's already the perfect angle for that acorn head, and I can be looking at a chart or something over here and hit and have it sound perfect. Now, what I want to realize that when I was looking over here, it was a bit too far that way, and now I made it a bit too close that way. But how I test my ride cymbal is I want to look away from it, play it, and get a vibe of like where that is. Now, sometimes if I'm going really, really crazy, and if I have the right stand, I'll go straight vertical. So who's the guy that plays for Tool? Danny Carey. Yeah, Danny Carey, if you look at his ride cymbal is like vertical, and he's right here, and when you see him play it, a lot of times he doesn't even have his eye on it, you know? But that's why he puts it there, is because he knows his hand, and he knows how his stick whips into the heel of his hand, and that's where he gets that setup from. And if you watch his eyes, if you watch his eyes, he's almost never looking at his sticks as he plays. And how he can do that is A, experience, and B, he sets up where his body wants it to be. What I walked you through here is pretty much like a great place to start for you to pick your own setup. And like a good basis for pretty much every single, it's a good place to start for no matter what drummer you're working with. You know, like how many times do you run into this setup where it's, you know, a crash and it's a ride and it's 3 tones? Pretty much everybody's body is built more or less the same way. But if you go through the process of you start with your spacing and you start with putting your snare drum in between where your legs sit, and you move your hi-hats, and then you do all these other extended drums, then you're pretty much automatically going to be adjusted to the idiosyncrasies of somebody else's anatomy, which is really like what makes one drummer different from another. And drum sets are completely different from any other instrument, meaning that a piano is always the same spacing, pretty much. Like there's not very much variance in keys. Yeah, there's difference in fret distance on different scale lengths of guitars, but you sit down on somebody else's drum set and they're different by a ½ inch from you, all of a sudden you're just knocking ins all day, which is why you need to get really, really good and really, really fast at this, because it's so common for drummers to share drum sets, especially when you're playing in a festival and, you know, there's a lineup and they want to have a fast change. So if you approach it from this way and you honestly go into a room and you practice just setting up and tearing down your setup, then eventually you get to a point where you can walk to somebody else's setup and say, I want this here, I want this here, I want this here, and these are good. And then you play like it's your own setup. All right. So yeah, that's pretty much everything. I'll probably do a little bit more adjusting and put my own cymbals on here, because another thing too that affects, like I said, that's a 16. That's a 16, right? 17. I was so close. Yeah, that's a 17, and I brought in an 18 and a 20, and my ride cymbal is a 22, and so it's going to hang down even more, and so I'm just going to have to readjust. But the principle of the where does your arm want to swing? Oh, my arm wants to make contact right there. Right? That means I move that one closer, and so when I'm looking at something. And that's how you get a no look. Yeah, it's like did I really touch any of these drums before I did that? You guys can speak up. You know, you guys have mouths. Yeah, right? And so like that's what happens when you start with the right approach of setting up a drum set.